Hey guys, how's it going? So this is the follow-up to my Romanian contract, Czech VZ24 Mauser. So what I've done is I've now outfitted it in the original style military stock. This is the one that I showed you guys in the last video that I got from Numerich. And I've also replaced the bolt body. So you can see this now has the proper straight bolt handle that has not been modified in any way. What I did is I took all of the internals and the extractor from the original bolt, because those were still just fine, and I swapped them over to this unadulterated bolt body. So with that in the stock, we're now basically in an original military type configuration, and overall I'm really happy with how this turned out. You know, everything functions fine. Have not had a chance to fire it yet. I'm gonna do some headspace gauges on it real quick just to make sure that it's safe to fire, but everything's locking up just fine and everything feels good. The action's smooth, works as it's intended to, and I'm really happy with this stock, guys. It has just enough, you know, patina and battle scars on it to be legit, which this is an original stock, so. But the stock's still in really good shape, which is kind of commensurate to the fact that actually the bluing on this receiver and barrel are quite nice. Regardless of the fact that somebody kind of attempted to sporterize it, luckily they didn't completely sporterize it. So all of the core things like the sights and all of those types of things were still intact. So I was able to rather easily bring this rifle back to its proper military configuration. And I would real quickly like to thank a longtime friend of the channel, Orion Fixer, because I left in the comments when we were chatting that I only had one little problem. See this screw here? There's no flathead, there's just two little holes, and I was like, yeah, I'll get it switched out once I get the proper screwdriver bit, which they make bits that are for this. I just didn't happen to have one. And he suggested, hey, if you find the right size snap ring pliers, that'll work. And I said, guess what? I have a set of adjustable snap ring pliers, and the two little prongs work just fine. So I'd like to thank you, Orion, for that. That certainly helped me, where I didn't have to prolong this project, and I didn't have to go out and spend extra money on a screwdriver that I might only use once. So thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. But anyways, yeah, I finally got this old girl back to how she should be. And I'll give you guys a real quick history story about this. Now, I'm not an expert on these, but I'll try my best to fill you in. So basically, as I previously stated, this was made in Czechoslovakia at Brno. And this particular gun has a prefix in front of the serial numbers. And in this case, the prefix is HR. So what happened is Czechoslovakia, let's go back a little bit. Back when Germany was using the Gewehr 98 as its frontline service rifle, Czechoslovakia took interest in the design. And they took the Gewehr 98, which this is a 1917 Danzig production German Gewehr 98, and they made their own version, designated the 98/22. So here's a typical World War I era German Gewehr 98. Now, as time progressed, they basically said, look, we're going to modernize our 98/22, which was their version of a Gewehr 98, and this gun actually was the inspiration for the development of the VZ24. So when we look at the Gewehr 98, we have a typical Mauser type action with a straight bolt handle. Now we have this roller coaster type sight and a full rifle length barrel. Well, they decided they wanted to make it a little bit smaller. So this is where the development of the VZ24 started. So they basically shortened down the barrel, put on more of a full length handguard that goes all the way across, whereas the Gewehr obviously has the shorter upper handguard. But this still retains the same type bolt body and the same straight bolt handle as a Gewehr 98. So what this did is it shortened it essentially into like a short rifle type configuration. Awfully similar to a German K98. The only thing is, this was not inspired off the K98. This was again inspired off of the Gewehr 98, the long rifle I just showed you. And the Czechs actually developed this about a decade before Germany developed their K98. So it would actually be more correct to say that the K98 was probably more inspired off of the VZ24 rather than vice versa, because they just basically beat the Germans to the punch as far as shortening the long infantry rifle of the Gewehr 98 to a much more compact, lighter weight, and handier platform. Now, you'll notice the Gewehr 98 shares some traits in common, obviously, with the VZ24. And likewise, the German K98 shares some things in common, but you'll notice that the handguard is much shorter on the K98. Not too dissimilar to the Gewehr 98, so that's something the Germans kind of stuck with. But overall, this is still, you know, the same type of Mauser action design. And the VZ24 could actually be considered an inspiration for the famous German K98. So, or K98K. Which K basically stands for Kurs, which is short in German, if you guys didn't know that. So, as far as the VZ24 goes, like I was saying earlier, this is a Romanian contract. So, what happened is they started producing these VZ24s in the state-owned arsenal of Brno, and then at a certain point they decided to privatize the arsenal to encourage exports to other countries. And they exported them to many South American countries, for example, and they also exported quite a bit of these to Romania. It's estimated near 500,000 of these Czech-made rifles were sent to Romania. So basically World War II comes along, and originally Romania was part of the Axis powers. So they were fighting against Russia, and these guns were notably used at the Battle of Stalingrad. Heavy documented use of these Czech-made Romanian VZ24s in the Battle of Stalingrad. So these rifles actually saw quite a bit of service in one of the heaviest fighting battles of World War II. Well, a couple other interesting things happened. So basically, Romania was friends with the Germans, fighting the Russians. Well, kind of, sort of. They were part of the Axis powers, but Germany had actually invaded Czechoslovakia during this time period. They took the factory over that was making these VZ24s in Czechoslovakia, and they basically took all the inventory, all the rifles that were already made or partially made, and the Germans designated them the 24T. So they started taking these rifles. It would no longer put any of the Czech markings on them. Instead, they would put the Waffenamtprol marks or German-proof marks, right? So Germany actually started making the 24T, which was basically this rifle, just with a different name. And then after doing that for a little while, Germany actually started making the K98s at the factory at Brno. So when I say there's a lineage between the VZ24 and the K98, they're actually pretty closely related, meaning they were both made in the same factory. These K98s, many of them were actually made at Brno. Keep in mind, at this point in time, Romania, still an ally, still part of the Axis powers. Well, after basically getting their butts kicked by the Russians over and over and over again, who were part of the Allies at this point, Romania finally threw in the towel, and they ended up joining up with the Allied forces. So then these VZ24s actually ended up being used to fight against the Germans. So there's an interesting scenario where you could have a Czech-made gun made in the factory at Brno, now in the hands of an ally, fighting against VZ24s that had a different nomenclature, that were also made in the factory at Brno, that were VZ24s that were redesignated by the Germans. So there's a lot of history with these rifles, and they're not often talked about as much as the K98, and they don't quite have the following. They're not worth as much money, and they don't have the cool factor of a German Mauser. But at the same time, these are very, very important rifles. They armed, like I said, many countries across the world. It ended up, by the time it was said and done, that more of these Czech Mausers were exported to other countries than used in the Czech military themselves. So if you want to know if you have a Romanian, just look for the 2-letter prefix. You'll see HR. Now the first letter is going to be what block it was made in. There's most of the letters of the alphabet were used. Not all, but definitely quite a few of the letters were used. So the first one would be the block. So this was the H block. And then we'll have the R behind it, just to signify that it was made in Romania. So from what I understand, they basically, each letter is considered a block of about 25,000 rifles. So you could have the AR block, the BRs, you know, IRs, JRs, KRs, MRs, NRs, QR, VR, and ZR, etc. All the letters weren't used, like I said, but a good portion of the alphabet was. So that's a way you can kind of date your rifle a little bit. Now I would note that for the first 2 years that these were produced for Romania. So Romania basically took these rifles on and put them into service in 1938. So from 1938 to late 1939, they would put a crest here. And after 1940, they got rid of the crest. The crest was basically the king of Romania's crest at the time. Now, most examples that had the crest, which this one formerly had a crest, let's see if we can see that there. There's a little bit of like the wings of the crest still showing here. You can see it's hard to pick up, but there's just a faint outline of a crest there. And this crest has been removed, which is often the case. These rifles also saw service after World War II and were passed down to other countries throughout the times. So if you find one of these with an original crest, you've got a collector's item. Not too many of them survived to the crest, but this one's kind of neat because it did at least at one time have the King's crest on it, which is pretty cool. And you can see pictures of that online. I'm not lucky enough to have one of those rifles, but yeah. Like I said, these were used in World War II, heavy fighting, purchased by the Romanians on contract from Czechoslovakia at the famous Brno. And this rifle, seeing how it came out 10 years before, ultimately became the inspiration for the K98 German Mauser. So I think these are kind of a little bit of an underappreciated and underknown variant of the Mauser. And just thought I'd show you guys, you know, why I took the time to put this rifle back into an original configuration. This one's never going to be a collector's piece, like I stated earlier. The numbers didn't match when I got it. They still don't. But at least I have it back in its original military configuration where it looks right. And I don't know, I like my old rifles to look good because I like the history behind them and the fact of the battles they fought through, the different countries that own these rifles, the service that these rifles gave over the years. And I just couldn't handle looking at it before, but it worked out pretty good. I swapped over some of the hardware. The barrel band, the front barrel band here with the 2 sling swivels was in much better shape on my original stock than the one that I got from Numerich, so I pulled that over here. Now I would note one little funny thing, like I showed you earlier, the special screw. The screw on this band has a normal flathead, so obviously at a certain point in the contracting of these rifles, they must have switched over the type of fastener they use, so that wasn't a problem, just a regular flathead here. The bolt body has some patina on it, but everything's good and it operates smoothly. So yeah, that should cover a brief overview. Don't want to keep you guys for an hour or anything, but there's a lot more subject matter here. So if anyone's interested in more about this rifle or other Mausers, let me know. I wouldn't mind doing another Mauser video. I really do like the Mausers, and I don't have a big Mauser collection, but I have a few. So if you guys like, you know, seeing several Mausers in the same video and me talking about the lineage from different countries that owned, occupied, sold and stuff, I find it interesting. So if you guys want more of that, just let me know in the comments and let me know how you guys think this turned out. Alright, so the Czech-made Romanian contract VZ24. This was a budget project. I have about exactly to the penny $250 into this guy, and I'm kind of proud of it. I like it. I'm definitely welcoming it to the collection, and it's probably never going to be valuable being a mix master, but at the same time it still has value to me in my collection. And man, one more time, I love this wood stock, so I'm really going to enjoy, you know, looking at this rifle. And after I, you know, check the headspace, assuming that's all good to go, which I think it will be, I'm going to enjoy shooting it also. So here we go. The VZ24, the one that inspired the German K98. All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.